Hi guys, welcome back to the home in Homestead. Today we're going to be doing some food preservation. We'll be doing some dehydration of fresh herbs from our herb garden. And we'll be using the Excalibur Food Dehydrator. If you'd like to see an unboxing video of this, I'll link that in the cards. And you can check out all the features and characteristics of the Excalibur Food Dehydrator that I'm using today. I will also link in the description box below food dehydrator that I'm using today, as well as some other options that they have. Okay, so here we have the fresh herbs that I harvested from our herb garden. And what I'm going to do is kind of sort through them, remove any dead or discolored parts of the plants, and then I'll get them set up on the trays. This is a 5-tray dehydrator, and then I'll set the thermostat for between 95 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll probably do 105 to start with, and it'll take 2 to 4 hours. So I'll set the timer for 2 hours, check everything, and then we'll see where we need to go from there. So what I'll be dehydrating today is some fresh chives, parsley, we have basil, and oregano. So let's get these into the trays and we'll get them dehydrated. So you just lift the cover off of the dehydrator. We'll set it off to the side. There's trays and there's a little mesh screen that whatever item you'll be dehydrating will sit on. I'm going to dehydrate things right on the stems, and I'll remove the stems from them later. If you'd like to see a video on what I planted and how I planted things in our herb garden this year, there's also a video on the planting as well as a 1-month update on how the plants are doing. So you want to place these on the tray with a little bit of a distance between them, but as they dry out, they'll really shrivel down. I like to add the dehydrated basil to soups, like a tomato basil. The fresh parsley, you can add that when you're making meatballs or other recipes. And the oregano, spaghetti sauce, pizza sauce, things like that. Chives go well over a number of sauces and dishes as well, just as a garnish or as a seasoning. So a lot of options, and it's nice to have them dehydrated from your own garden, because then you know that there's no chemicals or pesticides, and you can harvest them fresh and have extra fresh herbs in your pantry or spice cabinet. I also did a video on organizing your spice cabinet and creating a spice inventory, which I find to be good to do so that you know exactly what spices you have on hand and you're not purchasing herbs or spices that you already have and wasting money on that. There's also the potential of herbs or spices unnecessarily going bad because you didn't need them and you have too much of a certain herb or spice. The oregano. I'm hoping to do some fresh pizza sauce this year with tomatoes from our garden. So having some freshly dehydrated oregano from the herb garden will be a nice addition to that recipe. So stay tuned. Hopefully later this year, once I'm able to harvest some of the tomatoes, I'll be able to do that. This smells so good. I'm just kind of going through and taking any wilted or discolored herbs out. Let's get this one in there. Smush it down a little bit, because as they get dehydrated and dry out, they really shrink down. Okay, next, the parsley. So like I said, I'll run this for 2 hours and then I'll check the trays. If some of the items look really nice and dry, I'll remove them and can continue on with the rest if they're not drying. Here are the chives. We'll probably do 2 trays of the chives. I have a fair amount of those. Just taking out the little dried and yellowed tipped chives. Tear them in half. I've already harvested the chives once this year, and to do so you just cut the chives about 1 inch or 2 from the ground, and then they'll continue to grow, and they'll grow back again. And this height is from, I'd say, about 3 weeks ago now, so it grows pretty fast. Take the kitchen shears, a little easier. And the last tray. All right, let's get the bottom tray in. All the trays are in here. We'll apply the cover. It's a little groove on top, sets there, and we'll close it to the bottom. Next, we'll get this plugged in. All right, so now we'll set the temperature and time. So temperature, I'm going to set that to 105, and the time I'll set 2 hours and see how everything's doing. Okay, so it's been about 2 hours at 105 degrees. Let's see how everything's looking in here. Just remove the cover. We'll see if we need to add some more time. It's getting there. I think I'm going to add a little more time. Alright, so let's see how the dehydrated food is looking. So what I ended up doing was I increased the temperature to 115, and they've been dehydrating for about 4 to 5 hours now at that temperature. So once the time has been reached, the unit shuts off. I'll remove the front tray. One thing I did notice was that I had an awful lot of chives, and I would put chives probably on 4 to 5 of the trays, because once they're spread out, they dry so much nicer. I'll show you on this tray. I had the parsley, and I didn't have very much parsley, and that dried very well. I don't know if you can hear the crunching. It's a very dry, crunchy sound. And I had the chives on these 2 lower trays. Well, I took some of the chives and put them on with the parsley, and this is nice and dry. It did a very good job with that. But on these 2 trays, because it was so tightly together, I mean, they are dry and they're crunchy now, but some of them have a little bit of a softness to them still, so I'll probably dry maybe this tray a little bit longer as I prep the rest. But yeah, they're nice and dry, but part of them is a little bit of a softness to them still. So I would probably spread out the chives or something that had real dense harvest of amongst the 5 trays, and just do 2 batches, because then it would be more efficient, and they would just get dry after 1 cycle, and that'd be that. The oregano dried very nicely as well. You can hear how crunchy it is. It circulates around very nicely. And then for the basil, I would probably, they did a good job too. They're nice and crunchy, but I think next time I would actually peel the leaves off of the stems, just because their stems are much thicker than the other herbs that I dried. I think oregano, parsley, mint, they should do fine leaving on the stems, but I think the basil would have dried a little better if I would have taken them off of their stem system. So next, what I'm going to do, I'll put these dried herbs into containers. So I already have some fresh herbs of parsley, oregano, and basil. So what I'm planning to do is take what I already have and combine that and combine it with the freshly dried stuff that we have this year. So what I do is just kind of pluck it away from any sort of stem. And I leave it kind of large, so that when I take it out of the jar to use, then I can crush it at that time. That'll kind of activate the flavors and any oils and things in the herb. So first I'll do the parsley here. And I like to do this over a little sheet, because then I can curl that up and add it to the bowl afterwards as well. So if I wasn't adding an herb to an established spice jar, so things like the chives, I will be putting those into a snap lid Mason Craft mason type jar. It has a nice silicone seal, and then it locks down. If it was a smaller quantity, I have these ball jars with the 2-part lid and ring, and then I'll be using these Fresh Pack oxygen absorbers. I have 3 different sizes, 50, 100, and 300 cc packets. And what you do is you'll put whatever you're drying into the designated container. I'll be using snap lid mason jars and traditional mason jars. And you'll put the product into the jars with an oxygen absorber, and that helps to preserve and remove the oxygen from the jar, and whatever you dehydrated will stay dry and fresh and as it should be for much longer span of time. You get this booklet, and it has in here the standard size, so a 1-pint mason jar you would use. They have the number of cc's they recommend. It goes a quart, half gallon, gallon, 5 gallons. So you can do huge 5-gallon buckets of, flour or something that you want to keep shelf stable for a long period of time, and they have their recommendations. You can use larger than is recommended. That will not harm the food. So if I ran out of 50 cc's and I only had 100 cc packets left, I could throw a 100 cc packet in something that only needed 50, and it'd be perfectly fine. Now, besides this dehydrated herb project that I'm doing today and using the oxygen absorbers, I will also be doing some dried beans, and I'll be pressure canning some bean products. So the other day I went to the bulk food store and I purchased some black beans, or turtle beans they're called, and I have a larger Mason Craft. I will also be doing some pressure canning of beans, and I have black beans, which are turtle beans, as well as some kidney beans. I'll be doing some flavored beans and things, so watch for those videos. I'll be doing some pressure canning of beans. In the meantime, I'll be putting these dried beans that I purchased from the bulk food store into the Mason Craft large snap lid container, and I'll throw an oxygen absorber pack in here, and that'll help these beans stay fresh and dry until they need to be used. So I found it the easiest for when I do the chives to put them into their little container is I gather them up and I use a little kitchen shears and I cut them right into the container. That way they're not flying all over the place if you were to be using a knife. So the next step for keeping these shelf stable and continued to be dry is this process called conditioning. And then just over the next week or so, every few days, I'll just kind of shake the product that's in the jar. There may be a slight difference between how dry some pieces of herb or whatever item you dehydrated resulted in, so it's good to do the process of conditioning and just make sure there's no condensation forming in whatever jar or container you're storing them in. If you do notice condensation, I would take that item out, lay it on a tray, and just dehydrate again for another hour or so just to dry out that product completely, because if condensation forms, then the whole batch could mold when you're storing it. So it's a good idea to just kind of keep an eye on it for the first week, shake it around, kind of equalize the dryness or the humidity content, I guess you could say, inside of the container, and use those oxygen absorber packs. Those work very well to keep things nice and fresh. Here's some cookbooks and the guide that came with the Excalibur food dehydrator. These are good references to use when doing a food dehydration project. I will also link in the description box below some food dehydrator options you can check out if you're interested in this type of food preservation project, as well as what else I use for other food preservation styles that you'll see in videos on the channel. I'll also include the oxygen absorber packs, mason jars, and Mason Craft snap lid jars that you saw in the video today if you're interested in these type of containers and processes for saving and preserving your dehydrated food products. So I found the Excalibur Food Dehydrator did a very good job dehydrating the herbs. Next time I will do the items I mentioned earlier to help improve the efficacy and process of dehydrating the herbs. For keeping these dried ingredients fresh, I'll be using the Fresh Pack USA oxygen absorbers as mentioned before. Any unused ones, because I purchased some that come in 10 packs as well as some that came in 5 packs. Any items I don't use, I'll store in a ball mason jar with the 2-part lid, and then when the oxygen absorbs it, it'll seal down this lid and it'll keep the absorber packs fresh as well. I'll use mason jars and snap lid jars for storage of the herbs that I've dehydrated, as well as the beans as mentioned earlier, as well as some just spice jars for things that I'll use quickly, and I'll mix what I have with the fresh ones and have a nice blend of herbs to use in my recipes. So I hope you enjoyed this video today on dehydrating herbs from the herb garden and the Excalibur Food Dehydrator. Watch for more videos on other food preservation methods such as canning, water bath canning, pressure canning, as well as recipes and gardening and other such topics on my channel. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. See you next time. Take care.